Hi and welcome back to the channel. This is my 2020 roundup, the movies I saw for the first time in this benighted year and that I enjoyed. Now, they're not necessarily the best films, they're not the highest quality in all cases, but they're the ones that stayed with me and the ones that surprised me and the ones that delighted me and the ones that took me to places in cinema that I don't normally go. There are 11 of them, which is the way I work. They're not in any particular order. It's a little hard to do hierarchies on very, very different kinds of films from very, very different eras. So I'm just going to lay them out there. Let me know what you think. And let's get started with 2010's wild, crazy, mega low-budget film from Wakalliwood in Uganda, Who Killed Captain Alex. Now, if you haven't seen Who Killed Captain Alex, check out the trailer and then get a copy of it. For about $25 US, you can buy a copy from the original owners of it, the guys who made the film. And they will send you little hand-drawn art and all sorts of other things and some Wakalliwood stickers. It's an action film done on a $200 budget by people in some of the poorest parts around Kampala, the capital city of Uganda, and it's a lot of fun. The guys lost the original copy of it because they had to clear the hard drive off the computer to put more projects on. That's how low budget this thing was. They didn't have enough data storage to edit. Now they've since increased the amount that I could do. They've got a few resources. They've been resourced by people like me spending the $25 to buy the DVD. Takes a little while to get it, but they're wonderful people. They sent more stuff than a lot of Criterion editions will give you. And it's a crazy, wild ride of an action film made by people who are the poorest of the poor in the world and still entertaining everybody by doing it. There's a kind of DJ, VJ kind of thing. VJ Emmy does a narration over the original footage. The original version of it, without VJ Emmy's voiceover, is lost now, but this version is still pretty good. It's a great fun movie to watch. You can see it on Tubi, but here's my serious recommendation: put the pennies aside, go to the Wakalliwood website and buy a copy of these guys. Support them, let them make their movies. They are filmmakers from the guts out and they really should be supported. It's just a wonderful little film, crazy, mad and delightful all at once. Number 2 I did a whole video about, and it is Ozu Yasujiro's Tokyo Story. It's the story of the Hirayama family after World War II. The grandparents and parents come to Tokyo to visit their children who are living very busy lives in the post-war reconstruction of Japan. And it is one of the most human and heartfelt movies ever. Not going to talk much about it. I'll put a link here to my review of Tokyo Story on why I think it's one of the best films ever made. It is a total experience, and I've seen some people who watched it on my recommendation and said that it's a bit slow, but my advice is watch it again. It's one of those movies that slowly seeps into your guts and into your mind and into your heart. It really is a quality piece of cinema. It's deceptively slow paced, it's deceptively still in the camera work, but it's got a heart, and I think the older you get, the more you appreciate it, because you experience some of the same things that the family members in this movie experience. It's really a gem of a film, and I'm glad I actually bought a physical copy of it because it's worth it. Like Who Killed Captain Alex, it's one you want to have a physical copy of. It's a movie that should sit on the shelf where all your best movies are. When I saw it, I was kind of going through a bit of a slump, and I was kind of going, okay, I'm watching movies, but I'm not enjoying them that much. Then I suddenly watched this, and it rebooted and recharged my love of cinema. And that's an incredible gift for a movie made in 1953 to give you. Check out Tokyo Story. Lee Winnell's 2020 version of The Invisible Man, made for Jason Blum's Blumhouse Productions, is a really interesting horror film. It does some things incredibly well. It stars Elizabeth Moss as Cecilia, a woman who's trapped in a house in the countryside by her incredibly manipulative partner, husband in this case, who has perfected a means of invisibility. It's a beautiful, fairly low budget still, because Blumhouse do not do large budgets film, and it's got some great horror in it. It really does take you there and back, and it also addresses the issues that we're currently dealing with toxic masculinity, people who are trapped in relationships because of financial reasons. All of that stuff is there, and it's still a great horror movie as well. You should check that one out if you haven't already. It's worth your time, and it is scary as fuck in its own way. Next one's from 2018, but I didn't see it until 2020, and that is Blackklansman, the Spike Lee movie, starring John David Washington, Adam Driver, and Topher Grace, about Ron Stallworth, a guy in the 1970s, a black police officer, who basically started trolling the KKK. And it's really great. I love the way that the combines humour with horror, and real human horror, not just scary jump scare horror, but a real horror about what real people do to each other. It's a really nice film. I don't think it's perfect, but I like John David Washington in it. I like Adam Driver in it, and I'm not usually a big fan of his work. But it does give us a piece of history slightly interpreted in a different way, and it shows us a piece of American history which explains much of what's going on right now in America. I came to Blackklansman, as I said, a little bit late, but I've seen it twice now, and I've enjoyed it both times. It really is something that we hadn't seen before in cinema, and a lot of respect to Spike Lee for making it. On a lighter note, we got Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of Fire Saga, with Rachel McAdams and Will Ferrell, really kind of embracing the silliness and the dagginess of Eurovision, and it works beautifully well. Filmed wonderfully on locations including Husavik in Iceland, and it's got Pierce Brosnan playing his father. It's got Dan Stevens playing a Russian Eurovision contestant. It's a feel-good movie, and it's one of those movies that people really enjoyed and kind of leaned towards during various lockdowns. It came out on Netflix, which is doing some really interesting work at the moment. And it's silly. The songs are great. The jokes land. And I think it's Will Ferrell's best movie in more than a decade. And it shows that given the right motivation and given the right script and given the right production, he can still be funny. And it was surprising for me, because Eurovision songs usually really leave me cold, but the fact that these ones are slightly satirical about Eurovision and take it to that slightly extra level made it work for me. So you really should check out Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of Fire Saga, if you haven't already. I've got to really thank my friend Nathaniel DeBell for giving me this one, because we did it for the podcast. I'm rebooting the podcast next year, by the way. They haven't gone away, if you're wondering where Paleo Cinema and Martian Drive-In have gone. The podcasts are going to continue in 2021, but 2020 was a dead loss. Nathaniel and I did a review of Funeral Parade of Roses for the podcast. It's a 1969 Japanese avant-garde film about a gay young man called Eddie, played by a guy called Peter, who's Japanese, and his life in the gay underworld of Tokyo in the 1960s. It kind of foreshadows in some ways other films, including, oddly enough, Tetsuo the Iron Man. It's got some really surprising bits. It's also got some parallels with Park Chan-wook's Old Boy in some ways, but it really is surprising. It's erotic. It actually shows real documentary footage of gay clubs and things like that as they were in the 1960s in Tokyo. Homosexuality wasn't illegal in Tokyo until the Americans took over after the war, at which time they passed a law saying sodomy was illegal, but homosexuality itself was never illegal in Japan. but it was very much a marginalised subculture in Tokyo in particular, and gay young men and women drifted to Tokyo because they could find their own people there much easier than they could in other cities and in other prefectures. But you should check that one out. It's in black and white. I watched it on a download, and then I bought a physical copy of it after we did the podcast, because I think it's an important piece of Japanese cinema, and also a quite important piece of queer cinema. So you should check out Funeral Parade of Roses. While I'm talking about Japanese films, let's go with One Cut of the Dead. I saw this one on Shudder, and it's a bit of a mind blower. A film crew is making a zombie film on location at a disused water filtration plant when a real zombie apocalypse breaks out, and the director decides to incorporate that into the movie. But then it gets meta. Now, I'm not going to do any spoilers on this one, but One Cut of the Dead is crazily imaginative, and it's a film about filmmaking as much as it is about anything else. And it's funny, it's wild, you don't know what's going to happen 1 second to the next. It kind of is a love heart to low-budget horror filmmaking in the best way possible. You should really check that one out. It's on Shudder at the moment. It's also been released on physical media, released here in Australia. And it is wild. There's lots of gore effects and things like that. It shows the ingenuity of low-budget filmmakers when push comes to shove. It really is a lot of fun. And one that I wasn't expecting to watch and I knew nothing about, went in cold, and One Cut of the Dead's worth checking out. Next one's a documentary about a very sensitive subject. It's called Hitler's Hollywood, and it's about the 1,000 or so movies that were made in Germany between 1933 and 1945 while Hitler was in power. And in a sense, it not only documents the films, but it documents the change in cinema that takes place during those years, and the people who ascended to the highest ranks of German filmmaking, and other people who were marginalised, if not forced out of the country by the regime, let's say. It's got some really interesting films. There are some films. G.W. Pabst did a movie in it that shows in it called Paracelsus, which is set in medieval Germany, and it's a fine-looking film. It really is great filmmaking. Not political at all, so there's no kind of edge to it, but I think it's now a lost film. Yeah, Hitler's Hollywood. The weird thing is it's got some films that you really want to see in it, even though they were made by a horrible, nasty, catastrophic regime which killed 12 million people. The cinema itself looks interesting and shows the seductiveness of cinema in some ways. And it's a really great documentary to see, though I do have some friends who may find it a difficult viewing for personal reasons. But it was directed by Rutger Suchland. Yeah, I'm not sure. It came out a few years ago. The English language narration is by Udo Kier. If you're interested in the history of cinema, regardless of where it came from, and if you want to see some clips of some really interesting films, then you really should check out Hitler's Hollywood. Then we go to Richard Stanley's Colour Out of Space, not The Colour Out of Space, Colour Out of Space, from 2019, starring Nicolas Cage, Jolie Richardson, Madeline Arthur, and Tommy Chong. It's an adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's story, and given that it's set in modern times rather than the early part of the 20th century where the story was set, it's a pretty faithful adaptation to Lovecraft's story. And that's a hell of an achievement. It's got a look about it that no other film has. When reality starts changing because of a meteorite that lands on Nicolas Cage's character's family farm, the weirdness really just escalates and goes to places where we haven't seen it in cinema before. Richard Stanley is a really interesting filmmaker. He did Hardware. He also did a unsuccessful attempt at making a movie of The Island of Dr. Moreau, and even the making of that film turned into another documentary. It's surprisingly good, and Nicolas Cage's tendency to go over the top is entirely appropriate in this film. It's not an enormous budget film, but every cent is on the screen. There's some CG work, there's some body horror, There's some slow escalation in there. It's that kind of pucey colour tone that suffuses the latter part of the film is creepy as hell. You should really check out Colour Out of Space if you haven't. It was a really enjoyable watch, and I like the fact that even though I knew the rough direction where the movie was going, the really wow bits were totally unexpected, and that was kind of cool for me. I really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed watching it. Gondola. I did Gondola. I did a whole video about it, and it turned out to be the most successful video I did this year. It's an Indonesian superhero film. It's the start of a new cinematic universe, the Bumilangit cinematic universe, based on some comics that go back well into the first half of the 20th century. And it's intellectual property that's really well known to Indonesian people. There are a whole bunch of different superheroes involved in the Bumilangit universe based on the comics. Shri C, there are a whole bunch of them, and they're really interesting. And just seeing this movie, which has a lot in common with the Iko Uwais kind of action cinema, but with a superhero twist, and which kind of doesn't shy away from the political and social issues in Indonesia. This one's worth checking out. I bought the Blu-ray after having seen the movie, and it's I'm looking forward to the cinematic universe. The other movies are being made, but of course things are not progressing as they would have before the pandemic. But I really hope to see more movies in the Bumilangit cinematic universe. So check out below after you watch this video, and you'll see all of the links to those different videos that I did about this. Gondola is a lot of fun to watch. It's very different than an American or even an English superhero film, or even a Chinese one, or any other culture for that matter, or a Japanese one. But you should check it out and just kind of learn about the way film is made in different parts of the world, and the way things are different in different parts of the world. And the last one is also an Indonesian film, which was recommended to me when I did the review of Gondola, and that is The Night Comes For Us. It's the first movie that Netflix made with an Indonesian crew, and they basically financed it. It was directed by Joko Anwar. It's got Joe Taslim and Iko Uwais in it, and it's kind of like an Indonesian version of a Martin Scorsese gangster film in a lot of ways, with some kind of takeaways from movies like The Raid and The Raid Redemption. It's got incredible brutality, it's got crazy stunt work, it's got machetes and things. It builds its own kind of world as well. There's something called Six Seas, which are an enormous crime organization. So it borrows a little bit in that sense from John Wick, but it's very much an Indonesian film and an Indonesian action film. And if you've seen any Indonesian action cinema over the last 10 or 12 years, you know what I'm talking about. It's unequaled in its crazy violence. It's gory. It's nasty. You don't know whether the hero is going to live through the movie. You don't know whether any of the other characters are. They've got specialist fighters in there who've got special skill sets. Julia Stell plays another agent in there, and she gets to do some ass kicking in it as well. It really is a movie that, if you're an action cinema fan, you're really going to enjoy. A lot of fun. Locations are chosen really well, and the environments of those locations, as is the case in all good action films, become a part of the action, and the things you would naturally find in those environments become part of the weapons that the antagonist can get hold of. It really does kick ass in the best way possible. And if you haven't seen it yet, The Night Comes For Us is still on Netflix in most places, and you should really check it out. It's a good action film, and that's a lot of fun. So anyway, that's my list. They're kind of atypical. Let's have a look here. There's only two really American films in there, which kind of shows how the year has gone in the filmmaking. And there are no enormous blockbusters in there as well. I'm looking forward to seeing those in the upcoming year. We've got tickets to go and see Wonder Woman 84 in about 5 days. So I'm looking forward to that too, because I haven't seen a big budget superhero movie, a new one at least, in a while. It's been an odd year for us all, but we've got through it. We've managed to survive. Congratulations to us. Everybody should raise a drink, or if you don't drink, you should raise whatever liquid you like, your liquid of choice. and celebrate the fact that we got through it. We saw some good films, we supported each other, and it's been a thing. It's been unusual. I've been through a lot of changes. Everybody I know's been through a lot of changes, and a lot of the world is still continuing to change. But somehow we'll get through it. Tough times breed tough people. They breed resilient people. We're going to pay a price for it, but the price is worth paying because we did it to support each other. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to, please consider subscribing, hitting the notification bell. Tell me what your movies that you saw for the first time in 2020 and enjoyed are, because I'm always looking for new movies to add to the list. And by the way, the to be watched pile is getting bigger again. I'm going to do a haul video in January with the stuff that just poured in from the Black Friday sales. And there's some interesting films in there. So anyway, look after yourselves. Please wear a mask, wash your hands, wear the mask over your nose. The best way to tell an arsehole when you're out on the streets is somebody that either wears a mask as a chin strap or below the nose. Those people are real pricks. So anyway, look after yourselves. Watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Watch more good movies than bad movies. And I'll catch you next time.